So, I'm 9 years old, third grade. I'm sitting in my bedroom all alone. I suspect there's no one else in the house. As I recall it, there was no one else but my father. He was downstairs. I was just sitting up in my room. It's about this time of the year, maybe about this time of day. And the sun had already set. It was kind of getting dark. I hadn't turned on the lights in my room yet. And I hear my father's voice downstairs, and he starts coming up the stairs, and he's reciting the Raven. And I am just 9 years old, so I don't know what the hell this story's about. And I'm listening as he's coming up the stairs, and I'm hearing the story as well as the ominous footsteps coming up the stairs. And he comes into my room with a copy of Poe's works, and he reads me the entire poem, The Raven. My father was a very dramatic fellow, so I got to give him kudos. He did a really nice job. And I'm sitting there wondering what that's all about, although even at 9, I knew it was pretty cool. You know, it was scary, and it was romantic, and it was sad, all at the same time. And this big bird, I mean, it's really trippy stuff. And my father suggests that he and I might want to perform this for the family on Halloween. Now, in all honesty, my father was not the father who would pull out his ball glove and say, let's go out and toss. In fact, he wasn't around a whole lot. So, for a young kid, an opportunity to do something dramatic and fun, and I guess he chose me because I was the dramatic one, or maybe because I was the only one at home. Which could have been, yeah. And so I jumped at the chance. I thought, this will be so much fun. We're gonna perform the Raven for the family. How cool is that going to be? And he told me a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe. I was like, yeah, that's cool. So the very next day, I head off to school, and I'm all excited. And before class starts, I stop at the school library, and I pick up the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe. And I start to read. And I can assure you that the other third graders in my class did not share my enthusiasm for Edgar Allan Poe. But at 9 years old, I read The Raven, Telltale Heart, there's a funny story about that. I was once doing a show in a small town in rural Iowa, and I was doing the Telltale Heart, and I just killed my roommate, cut up his body and buried it in the floor, when a phone went off. Oh, you think that's funny? You're going to enjoy it when I tell you that the ringtone was NASCAR. So what we heard was, gentlemen, start your engine. Now this old fella, this farmer, he was a farmer, all right. He was in overalls, about 70 years old. I am sure he knew everything about running a farm. And I am equally sure that he didn't know that much about running that telephone. But he couldn't figure out how to turn it off. Jumped up, ran out of the room, never saw him again. That's true and sort of sad. Anyway, so I'm reading the Telltale Heart, The Raven, The Cask of the Amontillado. I'm reading The Black Cat, Murder in the Rue Morgue, board. I mean, this was some great, great stuff. And like a dutiful son, I began to memorize the rating. And I'm doing pretty good at it. I get many of the stanzas memorized in the next week or so. And of course, we never performed this. This was just one more disappointment in the sea of disappointments for a young boy. And I'm not so sure if my father ever expected to perform it, or if he just wanted to get me to read, or if he thought I would read, or if it was just a spur-of-the-moment kind of idea. I don't know, I never got to ask him. But what did happen was I became a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe. And he became what I often referred to as a haunting. And I think we all have hauntings. And these I refer to as people in history who, for one reason or another, really resonate. So I have a few, as I'm sure you do. Edgar Allan Poe was one of the first. Houdini. John Wayne. So I always felt kind of a connection to Edgar Allan Poe. Now you got to fast forward 20 years or so, and I'm an actor. I've been working all my life as a performer, and happen to be working in a bustling Midwestern city when I get a letter, and this letter is kind of a form letter. And, oh, I had you going for a second. It's a form letter. It's a call to action letter for actors who may have a one or two character show based on a historical character that they care to submit to this organization that was looking to book these shows all over the country. Now, you got to know something about actors. Actors are always looking for a job. And I knew that, but I also didn't have a one-person show. So I take this letter and I throw it in the waste paper. But as the fates would have it, this letter lands open. Not just open, but open. Right on the top of the can. In the kitchen. And every time I walk through the kitchen for the next hour or so, I keep seeing this letter and I keep reading this letter. Now, something else you got to know about actors. They're always broke. So they're always looking for work. They're always broke. And I thought, why am I throwing away this opportunity for work? So I read the letter again closely, and I thought, I don't have a one-person show. But if I had one, what would I do? And no sooner do I ask myself this question than the image of Edgar Allan Poe pops right into my head. And I think, wow, that's a historical character. That's it. That's an interesting historical character. And somebody I have a history. Somebody who I like and I find interesting. And I thought, well, they want to keep the show under an hour. Because they figure that they might end up booking you in a university or some school or something. They want to make sure that you can perform all of it in one class period. I'm thinking, well, under an hour. I'd have to do Telltale Heart because that's my favorite story. Maybe about 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Got to do The Raven because that's obligatory. I think, well, that'd be about 10. So I thought, well, my goodness, I got 30 minutes of the show and I haven't written a word. Edgar Allan Poe's written the whole thing. And so I called him up and I said, yeah, I think I'd like to do this. And they called me in, and I guess they knew me because they wanted a meeting. They didn't want to just talk on the phone. So I came down and I talked to them about Edgar Allan Poe. I didn't tell them what I told you. And they agreed to put me on their roster. Now, I was in town working on a film, so I was very busy and wasn't thinking much about it. But I did have the foresight to begin reading some biographies and reviewing Telltale Heart, The Raven. And I guess in the back of my mind, I was putting together some sort of form of this, but I hadn't had the opportunity to really sit down and work on it. But then you get the call. And they said, we've got your first booking. I said, oh, really? Well, that is fantastic. I said, when is that? They said, Saturday. Well, Saturday was 5 days away. And I did not have a one-person show. But I learned a long time ago that the answer to how is always yes. So I said, sure. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I try not to think about that. So I start contacting people, find a dear friend who finds this costume for me. And do the first shot. Probably done 1,500 times. Now, I apologize for breaking the fourth wall and ruining your willing suspension of disbelief. But it's just a belief, so we can bring it back. So what we're going to do now, before I begin, is you're going to agree to forget everything that I just said. And what's going to happen is the lights are going to go down. And we're going to start all over. So Matthew, can I have about 3 seconds in the dark, please? My head is spinning. It is as if 1,000 nightmares were at once being dripped within my brain. Yeah. I cannot for the life of me recall the events of these past few days. As if my memory were trapped behind a wall of stone and mortar. I was curious on my clothes and the stench of cheap whiskey. I swear on the grave of my dear mother, I have not had a drop to drink. Today, Mother, where is that now? Now where is that? I keep with me, I've always kept with me the likeness of my dear mother in my pocket here, but these clothes are, Oh, I can't do it. My mother. She is very beautiful, do you not? I beg your pardon, my dear ladies and gentlemen of the Literary Society. I did not see you there. I beg your pardon the state of my personal attire. I'm usually more appropriately composed. My mother, she is very beautiful. Do you not agree? Eliza Poe, she was an actress. My father, David Poe, he was an actor. He abandoned our family when I was only 2 years old. I understand he was not very talented. I choose not to think on him. My mother was, however, richly talented. My earliest recollections of my actress mother were of her struggling valiantly to support her 3 children by performing numerous roles from Boston to Charleston. I have a clipping from the newspaper I share with you. If I can find it. Oh, here. It says, she never came on stage, but a murmur ran through the house. What an enchanting creature. Heavens, what a form. What an animated and expressive countenance. Never was anything half so sweet. My mother. While touring through Richmond, Virginia, she was struck down with the dreaded scourge of the consumption. Tuberculosis. The Red Death, I call it. Everyone in Richmond knew of her career and of her plight, and though the profession of acting was looked down upon, she was loved by all. Desperately poor, she lay dying in a squalid boarding house. I watched on helplessly as she coughed up blood and sank into delirium. She died on December 8, 1811. She was only 24 years old. I was not yet 3. Besides this likeness which I have carried with me all the days of my life, I have no tangible memory of my mother. But I have a bone-deep memory of her presence. And I most certainly have a bone-deep memory of her loss, never to see her again. But you, my dear ladies and gentlemen of the Literary Society, did not come here to listen to my life story. No. I am to read to you from my published works. Now here. Here's a story that my publisher thought too loud for his readers. It is a frightening story. Do you want to hear a frightening story? Yes. Oh, well, good. Good, then perhaps you will appreciate this story of a man confessing to the police of his crimes. I call this story the Tell-Tale Heart. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been, and am. But why will you say that I'm mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled down. Above all was the sense of hearing, acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. I'm in my mind. Hearken and observe how healthfully, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object? There was none. Passion? There was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insults. For his gold, I had no design. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, the pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, By degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus bring myself in the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, just at midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a lantern, close, all close, so that no light shone out. Then I thrust in my hand. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so as to not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the room so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then when my head was within the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, though. So cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single dim ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very powerful old man, indeed, suspected every night. Just at 12, I looked in upon him as he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. I watched his minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the effect of my own audacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. But perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think I drew back, but no. The room was as black as pitch with a thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew he could not see the opening in the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. Steady. I had my head within the room, was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening. An old man sprang up in his bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle. In the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in his bed listening, just as I had done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no. It was a low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, while all the road has slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, keeping it with its dreadful echo, the terror that distracted me. I say, I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew he had been lying awake ever since that first slight noise when he had turned in his bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He'd been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. It is merely a cricket, which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim, and it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a little, very, very little crevice in the lantern. And so I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray like the thread of a spider shot from out that crevice and full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw the pleasant distinctness, all the dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of his face or person, for I directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was a beating of the old man's heart, and it increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and stood still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the beating of the heart became louder. Louder, became louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It became louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, and so I am, and now at the dead hour of night, and the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange and delicious that excited me uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew. Louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. It was some minutes longer the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. The sound would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart. I held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. The old man was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think no longer when I describe for you the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then removed 3 boards from the flooring of the chamber and deposited it all between the scantlings. I then replaced the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. The tub had caught all. When I made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking on the street door. I went down to answer with a light heart. For what had I to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and the officers had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all through the house. I made them search well. I led them at length to his chambers. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues. While I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat while I answered cheerily. They chatted familiar things. But then long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached and I fancied a ring in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued, became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued to gain definitiveness until at length I found the noise was gone within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I spoke more fluently with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much like the sound of the watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, yet the officer heard me. I spoke more quickly, more vehemently, and the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulation, yet the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, yet the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed! I raved! I swore at the chair upon which I had been sitting, and dragged it across the floor, but the noise arose overall and continually increased. It grew louder and louder and louder, and still the men shouted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought and this I think, but anything was better than his agony. Anything was more tolerable than his derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder! 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 Villains, I shriek, dissemble no more! I admit the deed! Tear up the plates! Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart! How many times thought the old man that story to be my father, David Poe? Or perhaps my foster father, Mr. John Allen. And who knows, perhaps it is a bit of both. You see, upon my dear mother's death, my brother, my sister, and myself were scattered about the various foster homes. I was taken in by the Allen family. Mrs. Frances Allen was very fond of my mother, and she pressed upon her reluctant husband to have pity upon me, poor little wretch that I was in his eyes. I was only 3 years old. Yet in spite of his faults, which were numerous in my opinion, he did, however, provide for me in the manner of a southern gentleman. Yet the rift between me and this rough and tumble tobacco merchant grew. A rift I would try all my life in vain to mend. Mrs. Allen, though, she showered me with affection. My heart was always open to her. I grew into a fine southern gentleman and somewhat of a natural athlete. We're just saying very little, for we all know that a baboon's a natural athlete. I did once, however, swim 6 miles against the current up the James River when I was only 15 years old. A feat that brought me much renown throughout Richmond. You know, about that time I met my dear friend, Miss Jane Stanley. She was the mother of a school chum. We became fast friends. We would sit and talk for hours on subjects of the most important. And I had at last found someone who understood my sensitive nature. Without a word of warning, though, she died of a cancer in the brain, and I was lost, helplessly, hopelessly lost. I found myself time and time again praying for her miraculous return and crying myself to sleep right there on her grave. About that time, I learned of the illness of my foster mother, Frances Allen. She too was stricken by the consumption, the Red Death that had taken my mother. This was not the first time, and sad to say, would not be the last time I would be visited by this demon. She lay dying in her room. She lay dying in her room, and her husband, Mr. John Allen, paraded women of the most questionable reputation. conducting himself in a most obscene manner in her house. And though that behavior may be acceptable to some, I felt that women should be treated with respect and dignity. I told him so in no uncertain terms. His response was to disown me, kick me out of the house, remove me from his will, if ever I was in his will. And I told him, I said, Richmond and the United States are too narrow a sphere for me, and the world shall be my theater. If you determine to abandon me here, I take my leave of you, and farewell. I shall be doubly ambitious, and the world shall hear of the son you thought unworthy of your notice. I was young. I was bold. I was bright. I was broke. Following year, I learned of the death of my foster mother, Frances Allen. See, the death of Jane Standard and Frances Allen reverberated deeply within me the loss of my own dear mother, awakening a monster that ate at my soul all the days of my life. I have a poem I wrote of love and loss I'd like to share with you if I might. This poem here I call Annabel Lee. It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. Yes, this was the reason that long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind came out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee. So that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, this was the reason that all men know in this kingdom by the sea that a wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. Our love was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. So all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Did I mention I was married once? I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. And she too, you can believe my damn luck, she too was taken by the same red death that had taken my mother and my foster mother. I have a letter I wrote some time ago, I believe will illuminate things for you. "6 years ago, a wife who I loved as no man ever loved before ruptured a blood vessel in singing. Her life was despaired of. I took leave of her forever and underwent all the agonies of her death. She recovered partially, and again I hoped. At the end of the year, the vessel broke again, and I went through precisely the same scene. And again, and again. Each time I underwent all the agonies of her death. I became insane with long intervals of horrible sanity. During these fits I drank.
God only knows how much or how often. My dear Virginia, it is safe to say that I did love you more than life itself. I regret I was never able to provide for you in a manner that a husband should. There was just never enough money. But there was love in that house. And we had fun singing in the parlor and playing in the yard. You remember that one time we were playing hot frog in the yard and I jumped too high, squatted too fast, ripped the whole back end out of my trousers. You remember that? Oh, I turned beet red with embarrassment, and you were just dancing around singing, Eddie split his britches, Eddie split his britches. My dear Virginia, I was never nearly good enough for you. I was always destined to sink my own ship at every turn. You know, I never told you, but when I interviewed for that job at the Custom House, I've been drinking. I arrived at the White House stinking drunk. Fortunately, I was intercepted by the President's son, who requested I return at a later date, entreating me to conduct myself more appropriately. I did return. I conducted myself perfectly. But I did not get that job. Perhaps I should not have taken that opportunity to try to sell a magazine subscription to the President of the United States. But I could write. My dear Virginia, the years I spent with you are the most explosive of my life. I wrote the first short story. I wrote the first detective story. I truly believe I was ahead of my time. Well, I wrote The Raven. I wrote The Raven while you were dying in the next room. Funny how that singular poem brought me so much fame and notoriety. Audiences flocked to see the mysterious and romantic Edgar Allan Poe give dramatic renditions of his poem, The Raven. School children followed me home, calling out, Raven! Raven! And then they'd skedaddle when I chased them down the street saying, None more! None more! Fame! Fame! But no fortune. I made $13 for The Raven. I have a clipping from the newspaper. Share with you. His lecture was a rhapsody of the most intense brilliancy. His eyes glowed like out of his own raven. And he kept us. He tracked. For my mother, for Jane Stannard, for Francis Allen, and for you, my dear Virginia, this poem is a mourning for your loss. The loss of your voice, of your touch, the warmth of your heart next to mine. My dear Virginia, never does a day go by where I do not miss you. Never has a moment passed where I not long for you from the bottom of my broken heart. I long for you now. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, nothing more. Ah, distinctly, I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished to tomorrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore. for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here, evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, too still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some distant treat enter that my chamber door, some late distant treat enter that my chamber door. This is nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "oh madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortals ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. It is the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there stepped the stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped nor stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door. Perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. Perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this empty bird beguiled my sad fancy into smiling by the strange and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven thou," I said, "art short o' graven, ghastly grim, an ancient raven wandering through the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though his answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door. Bird or beast upon a sculpted bust above his chamber door with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on that placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather then he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me as my hopes have flown before." And the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken. Doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whom unmerciful disaster followed fast, and followed faster till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of nevermore. But the raven still beguiling my sad soul into smiling straight, I wheel the cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking, what this ominous bird of yore? What this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking? Nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl, whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease, reclining on the cushion's velvet lining at the lamplight closed door. But whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight closing o'er, she shall press. Ah, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee respite and nepenthe from thy memory of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget thy lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, think of evil prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempest ever, whether tempest toss thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted on this desert land, enchanted on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, think of evil prophet, still it bird or devil, by the heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within a distant Aden, it shall clasp the Satan maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. O the raven, nevermore. Be that word or sign of party, bird or fiend, I shriek upstarting. Get me back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beat from out my heart. And take thy form from off my door. O the raven, nevermore. And the raven never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid, busted palace set above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming. And the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted. Nevermore. I beg your pardon, my dear ladies and gentlemen of the Literary Society. I'm not feeling quite myself today.
What a spirited presentation. My favorite part of the program, we have an opportunity to bring Edgar Allan Poe back out to ask some questions, if you're bold enough. Remember the date is October 7th, 1849. So let's give a big round of applause, Pleasanton. See if we can bring Edgar Allan Poe back on stage.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Literary Society. You told me I'm here to answer some thoughts, questions, ideas that you might have, but my form is there. I'm here to answer any thoughts, questions, ideas that you might have. All you have to do is raise your hand. Come on here, ladies and gentlemen, up there, yes, sir.
How's Rosalie and William doing, and what are they up to these days?
Well, my brother's dead. My sister. My sister's very ill. Her mind somehow. I don't really understand it. I see her and I love her. But it seems to me that though she's 40 years old at least by now, she's still 12-year-old in her mind. Thank you for asking. Appreciate that. Hey, gentlemen in the back, yes, sir.
Which president did you approach for the job?
Well, now you're asking me a historical question. I was drinking, it wasn't a good time. I believe it was President Poe, is what I believe. Could have been Tyler. Yeah, those two fellas, they look a bit alike. Politics wasn't much different either. Yes, right there.
Didn't you like puzzles and stuff back then?
Can you speak like a little bit louder?
Didn't you like puzzles and stuff?
Did I do puzzles and stuff, you say? Cryptograms, yes, I did. I like to create cryptic messages and puzzles and little mysteries, and we used to publish them in the magazine. I worked for many magazines. That was my trade, working in the magazines as a literary critic. But I would also have a little portion where I would do these little puzzles and cryptograms, and it was a lot of fun. I did that, and the newspaper would oftentimes offer a small little token to anyone that could solve them. There's one I did several years ago, no one solved, and I suspect no one ever will. It was pretty ingenious, and I ain't gonna tell you again. Yes, there's a young lady right there in blue.
Sir, would you kindly shed some light on some of the mysteries surrounding your death?
Well, man, I hadn't died yet. Very presumptuous. You know, we all know it's coming, but nobody wants to think about it. A great writer once told me, he says, everyone wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. We'll get back to that later. Yes, sir.
How old were you when you wrote The Raven?
Well, I'm going to give it a guess, because I don't really recall my age at times. It was a few years, it wasn't that long ago, just a few years ago. I'm going to say about 34. I was about 34 when I wrote The Raven. Maybe 35. Not much older than that.
Can you tell us a little bit about your time at,
West Point?
West Point?
No, West Point, well, I can tell you very little because I was there a very short amount of time. Well, you got to understand, I went to the University of Virginia in its inception, you know. And great Thomas Jefferson started the University of Virginia. And he was under the impression that 17-year-old boys left unattended to take care of themselves. I think we know better. And it was after a faculty member had been shot, and there were riots, and there was gambling, and all sorts of shenanigans going on there that they finally put the lockdown on it. But I was there at the height of the craziness. You got to understand, John Allen sent me off to the University of Virginia, paid for tuition, but didn't give me any additional funds. So there's no money for books, there was no money for clothes, there was no money for food. He was in the mercantile business, so he hands me a bolt of black fabric, tells me to get a suit made. Now, there was no money for suits to be made. And so I spent the first year there gambling, and probably did a few things I shouldn't have done to get the money I needed to survive. We're just talking about a couple of sticks of wood to keep the room warm and food in my belly. So by the end of the first year, I had mounted up some gambling debts. And so I decided to skip off the second year of school. I went off to join the army. Mainly to get away from these young hooligans that thought they could squeeze money out of them. They actually went to my foster father, John Allen, to get the money. I'd have loved to see that. I suspect he ran them off with a shotgun. He was nothing to mess with, and he wasn't nothing party with his money. So I joined the Army under an assumed name, which is a court-martialable offense, because I didn't want anybody chasing me down. And I did very well. Within a year, I was a sergeant major. I was in charge of my own artillery division. And I was loved by all. But I'm not really big on reputation. I don't like people telling me what to do. So after a year, I had about enough of that. So I went to my CO, and I told him that I had, I enlisted under a false name, and he liked me. And they all got together. Man, this is really something. He got together with his superiors, and they all talked about him. And they decided that they weren't going to prosecute me. They were not going to give me dishonorable discharge if I were to take an appointment to West Point. I suspect they thought I was smarter than I thought. And now this, you know, kind of squirmy little fella, so I saw that as an answer to get the heck out. Also, though, I got to tell you, I love colleges, universities. I love being around books. I love being around learned fellows, and I love to learn. And so I saw this as an opportunity to learn. So I went off to West Point. In all honesty, I only lasted a few months. I just couldn't get up 4 in the morning. March all day. If I could get up at 4 in the morning and read all day, if I could get up at 4 in the morning and study all day, I'd been there. And that's kind of what I thought was going to happen, but there was a lot more marching than there was studying. And I just, my nature couldn't take it. And so I began to miss readily, and you can't do that too often. They keep score. And so I was dishonored and discharged from most. I can't tell you too much about it because I wasn't there that long. Beautiful place. Robert E. Lee was in my class. Really. Of course, he's yet to become famous. So. Yes, Miss.
How did Lenore die?
Well, there wasn't no Lenore, really, but Lenore and all the women in my poems and stories. And it's a big theme with me, lost love. And if you care to explore some of my other stories, you'll see quite often a man's beautiful love of his life dies prematurely, and he pines after her. In one such story, he pines after her so much that she comes back to him. That sounds like a good idea, but she's been in the ground for about a year. So, a bit of a rude awakening. But that's a theme. That's a theme. In this presentation here, I shared with you the main people in my life. My mother, Jane Stannard, foster mother, my wife. And so Lenore is a combination of all of them. And while I was writing The Raven, of course, Virginia was very ill. She was young when she first contracted tuberculosis. And that's why she was able to fight it off so long. She fought it off about 6 years, going on 7. And that was hard. It's hard on me too. So that's sort of the inspiration. Yes, ma'am.
How would you characterize the intended audience for your poems and short stories? And do you think people are still going to be reading your work in hundreds of years?
In hundreds of years. You know, I don't know. I took my lead from what was going on the other side of the pond. You know? Here in America, we're big in romance. Romance, they're a big theme that's going on right now. But in Europe, they're big on God. So they're writing about some of these more macabre things. But it occurred to me, because I spent a lot of time in Europe. Spent from the time I was 6 till I was about 12, living in London and Scotland. So I read a lot there, and I got a good sense of the culture. And I saw this kind of Gothic thing, you know, that was very, very prominent there. And as I told you a little bit about my life here, death was very close to me, and was always a theme in my life because I've been exposed to it from a very, very young age, because it affected me so deeply. And so we write about what we know, and I knew a lot about death, and I ruminated about death. You know, how does the loved one feel after they lose someone? What happens after you die? What happens if you die, you know, if you're buried prematurely? All kinds of thoughts about death. And that dovetailed very nicely into the doctor's sort of movement that's going on in Europe. And I kind of, and because I was living here, I was kind of immersed in the romantic movement. And so, if you read over my stuff, you'll see there's a great romantic influence as well as a kind of a Gothic influence, with a little of the macabre, right? And I hope that these are fundamental enough that people will read them if anybody's reading at all.
We have time for one more.
One more question, you get it.
How long did it take you to write Raven?
A few weeks. Yeah, Raven was I loved writing it. I loved the whole process of writing that poem. I took great care. I believe that poem is probably one of the greatest poems ever written. I love that. Yeah. And I've had a lot of success with that poem, although not no financial success.
Round of applause for Edgar Allan Poe. It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce Duffy Hudson. Let's get a round of applause for Duffy. Duffy is an actor, director, writer, teacher, and filmmaker. After graduating from college, he moved to New York City, where he attended the Circle in the Square Theater School on Broadway. He has studied and worked with many wonderful directors and actors in his career, and he has recently been honored to perform for Edgar's 210th birthday celebration at the Poe House and Museum in Fordham, New York, where Poe lived his final years. Let's give a big round of applause to Duffy Hudson.
But he's really just a boy from the Midwest. So, any other thoughts, questions, ideas? And now, we can go to yours. How'd I die? How'd Poe die? Listen, you're gonna read a lot of stuff about Poe dying, and I can give you the gist of it without taking half the time we have the questions. But go ahead and read up on it. But you're going to find a lot of people are going to say that he was a victim of cooping. And cooping was a practice. They have much more sophisticated ways of stealing votes nowadays. But back in the day, if you were running for public office, you would hire a handful of goons and run around town on a wagon and pick up unsuspecting, drunk, homeless, indigent people, and anybody that you could overpower, and you'd offer them a drink or a buck or a punch if they didn't follow you, and you get them on your wagon. You drive to a polling place. You say, "You are Mr. Jones here. You can vote for current mayor." Then you go in and you vote for the mayor, and then you get out. You drive to the next polling place. You change their shirt. Everybody change clothes. If they resisted, you beat them up or ply them with alcohol. It didn't matter. They usually didn't resist. But if you did resist, you could get into a lot of trouble. You could get really hurt. And I'm sure people were killed. Because the guys that were running the wagons were not, it wasn't Andy Hardy running the wagons. But, and for years, that was the reigning theory, which is absurd. I just did, 40 minutes of Poe. And I'm going to ask you, if you were riding by on a wagon, and you saw that guy, is he the guy you're going to pull over and say, "Hey, you come with me"? No. No, are you kidding? They'll tear your wagon apart. They'll kill you all. I mean, he was an intense human being, and most likely the smartest man in any room he had ever been in his entire life. I don't think he rubbed elbows with some really amazing human beings. I bet he was the smartest man. Oh. And so, that's just a foolish, because of course he was found on election day in Baltimore. So somebody just said, "Well, what about this?" And then everybody goes, "Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea." Stupid idea. You're going to read a whole bunch of it. Rabies, another stupid idea. That came out in the 80s. Some current doctor, I guess he wanted to get clicks before there were clicks. Comes up with this idea. Well, Poe probably had rabies. And you know what? People are so stupid. They go, "Oh, Poe had rabies. Where's the dog? Look, he got rabies for what?" With absolutely no evidence, Poe had rabies. 2004, a fellow named Matthew Pearl is writing a book about Edgar Allan Poe. Beautiful book. And he does research. He does research that nobody ever did. Certainly does research that the doctor who came up with rabies didn't do. And he goes to the Westminster Church. And Poe's buried in Westminster Cemetery, right next to the Westminster Church in Baltimore. He goes there and he gets permission to go through all their archives. Well, he does his due diligence, he goes through everything. And what does he find? He finds a newspaper clipping from 1875. This newspaper clipping was when they exhumed Poe's body. The cemetery had been pretty embarrassed because Poe's career was meteoric. After he died, like James Dean, he was world famous. And people came to see Poe's big grave. And people would climb over the fence to see Poe's grave. They had to actually rebuild their fence on more than one occasion. They'd come in, they wanted to see Poe's grave, but it was unmarked in the back. And finally, the cemetery's had enough of this, and the whole town is like, you guys got to get this together. And so, Walt Whitman, the great Walt Whitman, gets together with a bunch of local Baltimore socialites. They raise $10,000. They build a beautiful monument where Poe, his mother-in-law Maria, and his wife Virginia are buried. 25 years later after he died, and the grave digger who buried Poe is still working at the cemetery, so he goes to dig Poe up. And when he digs up Poe, he makes a report to the cemetery. He says, well, I dug up Poe. It was Poe for sure. Clothes were right. It was Poe. There was really nothing left, some hair and bones, and it closed. He said, so I took everything, and I put it in this nice new coffin so that we can have a big celebration coming up. But I noticed something very peculiar. I noticed that there was a big mass, as hard as a rock, inside of his skull. And he said it was too big to come out of his neck, it was too big to come out of his eye sockets. It was big and hard, like a rock. And he couldn't break it, he didn't know. He tried to break it with a stick, he thought maybe it was just a clump of dirt or something. So he buried it. Look, it's wrong, this is part of it. And so what Matthew Pearl found in 2004 was a newspaper article that went nationwide, actually, that said that Poe's brain is still in his skull. That was what the article was, and it's all about the fact that there's this mass inside of his skull. Well, if there's a mass inside of his skull 25 years after he died, there was a mass in his skull when he died. So, he had a brain tumor. Whatever was that brain tumor was, maybe a giant calcium deposit, I don't know, is that even possible? But something that solidified. So, I have no doubt that that's true. A year before he died, he had a lost weekend where he was found wandering in the woods, kind of lost it. We think of him losing it and stuff, and we naturally assume drugs and alcohol, but that wasn't the case. Poe did no drugs at all, ever, none. When Virginia died, he drank the rest of her laudanum, and that was the only recorded incident of anything other than alcohol. And he was a binge drinker, so he wasn't drinking every day. He wasn't hiding alcohol in the cupboard. But if something happened and he felt bad, and mainly when Virginia was really ill. Although he started drinking as a kid. I mean, he was drinking. But he was a binge drinker, so he drank. Sometimes he'd drink one night and wouldn't drink for months. Sometimes he would drink one night and then drink for 3 weeks straight. Then he'd wake up, jobless, and everybody was mad at him. And he had to get his life back together. And he could do that. And there are instances where he was on the wagon for 2 years, 3 years, 6 months, all sorts of things. I mean, so his drinking was much less dramatic than people want to say. And the alcohol and the drug use was non-existent. I mean, maybe Mick Jagger can write "I Can't Get No Satisfaction," but you can't write "Once Upon a Midnight Dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many points here, calling you forgot Lord," while you're stoned.
What other characters have you played?
I have about 10 different one-man shows. What happens is this was the first one I ever did, but what happens here is you do this and you get a couple of clients, People say, oh, we love your show. But then say I did it here, and then I leave, I go, well, gosh, they love my show. Well, you can't come back and do Poe the next week. But if you come up with another character, they'll go, oh, you got another character. So then you can use that client again. So I do Einstein, I did it here. I do George Burns, I did it here. I do Houdini, did it here.
Tesla, Audie Murphy. I do a Christmas Carol. I do the entire novel in about 75 minutes. Depending on 30 minutes. It's pretty cool, though. What else? I do full-up magic shows.
Have you done all this year?
I have. I'm the only person in the world that does Audie Murphy. Imagine that. There are only about 5 people in the world that do Poe. There's a bunch of people that do Einstein, but nobody does a show. Most of them just do I don't know, look alike. So there's a couple guys that do Tesla. There's a few people who do me, and not a biographical. I do a biographical. Anyway, any other questions? Yes, young man.
It seems like you have a lot of knowledge about Poe. When did you first get interested in him?
There was this whole thing I did at the very beginning. Canoodling with the young lady next to you. But I had started the show. He's like, hey, honey, he ain't started the show yet. No, that's the story. So that's how I became interested in Poe as a kid. My father introduced me to Poe. And I became enamored with him. And he became sort of one of those characters who you always love, you know? So he was always a part of my life. Not like it is now. I mean, I just read his stuff, and I was like, if somebody brought up Poe, I would go, oh, yeah, and I would know something about it. You know, I know a lot about John Steinbeck, too, but I'm not going to do it one because I've read his books, but and that's sort of the way it was with Poe for a long time until I started doing this, and then you really start digging into my life. And there's so much. When you're doing a human being's life, there's so much to their life. I mean, what do they do on Thursday afternoon and the week after their 32nd birthday? You have no idea. You have no idea about the particulars. You read biographies and they just tell you, the big moments. You go, well, yeah. What was he like on a day-to-day basis? So you have to extrapolate that. You realize, well, he was a fiery guy. Very likely, manic depressive, very likely. But I refuse to diagnose anybody with 21st century diagnosis when, they're not here to defend themselves or even, submit to an examination. Anyway, so there's a lot of guesswork too. Yes, sir.
Poe did a lot of things. Poetry, books, from magazines, and those kind of things. Which was he most partial to?
Oh, poetry. Poetry was his thing, big thing. And he wrote mostly about beauty. And that ties into the whole thing, like with Lenore and Lost Love. I was really big on it. That was one of his major themes. And the second major theme is you can't get away with murder, which is beautifully illustrated here in Telltale Hearts. And you see that in The Black Cat, you see that in The Imp of the Perverse. Someone does something terrible, and they think they're scot-free. And the cat meows from behind the wall, and you go, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. And that's going on in here. One more. Yes, gentlemen, back up.
Dark back here.
What's your favorite literary work, personally?
Opposed?
Well, thank
Opposed is Telltale Heart. But I'm an actor, so I love it mainly because it's almost like it's almost like a play. It's dramatic, it's one character, it's narrative, it's dynamic. I mean, you can chew up the scenery. I can climb up these curtains while I'm doing it, and you'd be like, okay. There's hardly nothing you can do. It's so big. It's so big. It's like Dmitri Tonkin, very famous musician. And he wrote all the music for many big movies in Hollywood in the 50s. And he once said, I'd love to write the music for John Wayne movies. He said, because they're so big. You got Monument Valley, it's big, and I can write big music. And that's the way Poe wrote. Poe wrote like Van Gogh painted. Big and bold and in your face. And I love that. And there's no sort of subtly. It's like in your face. And there's something really beautiful about that. And it reminds us all, I mean, he was so diametrically different than everybody that was writing in his time. We only have people writing relatively like that, 50 years, 75 years, 100 years later. He was so different. And it just goes to show that your true beauty is in your uniqueness. It's in what makes you you. That's all that anybody really cares about. We all try to slide into the crowd, but the crowd's dead, for art. So, but that's, I think, my favorite piece of work, because this is so intense.
Big thank you to Duffy Hudson. Let's see if we can get everybody on their feet for a big round of applause. That concludes our show. See you next time.